Given the general scarcity and nature of the flown American flag artifact showcased in our previous episode, the availability and cost of such an item may place them out of reach for many collectors. Today we're going to unpack 3 vintage artifacts from the early days of the Space Shuttle program, specifically from the history-making flight of STS-8. And one of those items is a genuine space-flown artifact whose price point puts it well within the reach of virtually any space collector. So away we go. Hello collectors and space fans, I'm Jim Frangione and welcome back for the 10th installment of Takin Up Space, the place where space history lives and where every artifact tells a story. If you're as passionate as I am about the history of spaceflight and collecting vintage artifacts and space-age memorabilia, be sure to click on the subscribe button down below and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on a single episode. With the advent of the Space Shuttle, the U.S. space program resumed crewed flights and began to once again rack up a string of impressive space firsts. The first reusable crewed vehicle, the first runway landing of a crewed spacecraft, the first American woman in space, the first deployment of commercial satellites, the first untethered spacewalks with use of the Manned Maneuvering Unit, or the MMU, and the first recovery and return of satellites from space. There was an awful lot going on in those early days of the Space Shuttle. And the 8th flight of the Space Shuttle was no different. The first night launch of a Space Shuttle, as well as the first night landing. The launch of INSAT-1B, a communications and weather platform for the Indian Space Research Organization. But that's not the first for which STS-8 will long be remembered. STS-8 truly made history by way of one of its crew members, astronaut Guy Bluford, who in the summer of 1983 became the very first African-American to fly in space during a 6-day mission aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. As mentioned in episode 3, NASA's 8th group of astronauts was selected in 1978. At the time, this was the largest and most diverse group of astronauts ever selected by NASA. The 35 new guys, or TFNGs as they were affectionately referred to, included the first 6 American women astronauts, America's first Asian American astronaut, and the first 3 African American astronauts, Ron McNair, Fred Gregory, and Guy Bluford. The first of those 3 to fly, Dr. Guy Bluford, came to NASA as an Eagle Scout, a PhD aerospace engineer, a United States Air Force officer, and a fighter pilot, an incredibly accomplished individual by anyone's measure. While history will long remember him for his first flight on Space Shuttle, Dr. Guy Bluford remained with NASA and the Air Force until July of 1993, having flown on 4 missions, STS-8, STS-61A, STS-39, and STS-53, having amassed a total of 28 days in space in 2 flights each aboard the Challenger and Discovery. Fittingly, the first artifact for today is this autographed portrait of Guy Bluford himself. While this is a latter-day portrait of Guy from his final flight in 1992, no collection of historic astronaut autographs should be without this one, and I still recall the thrill it gave me when I received this one. It's important to look at the signature for the sake of comparing and contrasting as we move to the second artifact for today, which is actually a signed STS-8 crew photo. I say signed in air quotes because this one, while signed, was signed by an auto pen machine and not by the astronauts themselves. To be clear, they are not printed on the photo, they are signed in ink on the photo, but by a machine. As I alluded to in a couple of previous episodes, given the demand for astronaut autographs and the limited time of the astronauts, oftentimes when sending away for an autograph, one may get an auto-penned photo in return. This was certainly the case back in the heyday of the space race and the early part of the Space Shuttle program. While not nearly as valuable as authentically hand-signed photos, auto pens from the early flights have their place in the world of collecting. They're certainly vintage and they're really, really cool. In fact, I have many dating back to Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, as well as Space Shuttle. And in all cases, they are way more affordable and way more available for collecting. Just don't get duped. As I said, sometimes the folks selling these things think that they are hand-signed and price them as such. Or worse, they know they're machine-signed and still try to sell them as hand-signed. Do your research, and the folks at Collect Space can really help you out there. And lastly, as I alluded to in the opening, an equally affordable yet genuinely flown artifact from STS-8. 1983 represented NASA's 25th anniversary, and to mark the occasion, NASA, in collaboration with the U.S. Postal Service, created a commemorative postal cover or envelope, and they flew some 260,000 of these on board the Challenger during the STS-8 mission, and they were made available to the general public for around $15. They depict the mission patch on the cover. They're postmarked with the launch and return dates, and each is numbered on the back. I agree with the good folks over at Collect Space. These make for an awesomely cool collectible. The provenance is bulletproof, and given their numbers, they remain incredibly affordable even today. In this case, eBay is probably your best friend. As seen here, depending on the condition and completeness of the folio, these can be had in the $20 to $50 price range. As an entry-level flown item, they don't get any better than these. What a conversation piece. It was actually flown in space, and flown aboard the Challenger, no less. In the folio or framed on your wall, it just invites conversation and discussion. It was actually there. It's a tangible piece of our shared space history. Stare at it long enough, and it can be the stuff that can launch your dreams. And that's pretty amazing. After all, as Christopher Columbus put it, the first journey is the one in the mind. So there you have it, the story behind the 3 artifacts for our 10th episode of Takin Up Space. I hope you've enjoyed seeing these, learning a little bit about space collecting, and about the flight of STS-8 and the first African-American in space. I know I've certainly enjoyed sharing these artifacts and these stories with you. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in to this channel. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up down below, and feel free to let me know what you think by dropping me an email at jim.takinupspace@gmail.com. Until next time, collectors and space fans, keep your head held high and keep your eyes on the stars.